Okay, we've talked about division by a monomial. Now let's talk about division by anything else. And before we do that, let's quickly review through regular plain old division. Now, if you're looking at a division problem, then we have all of these special words that we need to know also. The dividend is what is being divided. The divisor is what you're dividing by. And the quotient is the answer. So let's say, for instance, we had something, let's do something pretty simple, like 10 divided by 2 is 5. 10 is what you are dividing. 2 is what you're dividing by, and 5 is your quotient or your answer. Okay, you probably want to make sure that you understand those words because you will be seeing them over and over and over again. Alright, now let's look through this problem, and I realize this is plain old division, and I also realize that it's pretty horrendous. We're not going to do the whole entire thing. We're just going to do a few steps so that we can start seeing the pattern. Okay, if we were going to work this, you do not know off the top of your head what all of the multiples of 42 are. So it's almost impossible for us to look at this problem and say, well, the answer is blah, 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 blah. We just can't do that. We have to go step by step until we find the answer. So let's pay attention as we're going through this, what those steps are. Now, first of all, we say, okay, 42, it won't go into 2. It won't go into 245, to 24 rather, but it will go into 245. So the very first step is we're looking to see how many times this will go into just a first few of those numbers. So let's see, what do we know? We know that 245, 42 times 5 would be 210. So I'm going to put my 5 right there. And then 5 times 42 is 210. And now we subtract. So when we subtract, we're going to get 35. Okay, we can just do that without really even thinking so much about it, but let's really think about what we did. You do not know how many times 42 goes into 245, unless you used a calculator and just started, trying to guess. But a better way to deal with it is to look at those first numbers. You do know how many times 4 goes into 24. 4 will go into 24, 6 times? So 40 times 4 would be 240. We're going to be a little bit over that. So then we need to back down and go to 5. We always use those first numbers as kind of an initial guess, something to get us going. Now, remember that once we figured out that it was 5, we put our 5 up here. We also kept it nice and lined up according to what we were dividing into. It won't be the same with polynomial division, but it'll be very similar. Lining things up is extremely important. Then once we put our number up here, then we multiply diagonally. 5 times 42 is 210. So multiply diagonally. Then the next step that we did was we subtracted this number. Now subtracting is the same thing as changing the sign. Instead of it being a positive 210, we made it a negative 210 and then combined those numbers. And then our next step is to drop our next digit and start all over again. So let's see, 42 will go into 356 maybe about 8 times. So let's say, okay, I'm going to put my 8 here because I'm keeping everything nice and lined up. And 8 times 42, remember we multiply diagonally, is 336. And then rather than add those, or our rules say we're supposed to subtract them, which is the same thing as changing the signs and combining like terms. So that would be a positive 20, and then we would carry down our next digit and begin all over again.